David Frum, thank you so much indeed for your time. Listen, here's my dilemma, David. I hope you can explain it to me. Now, I get it. I've said that Trump is crude, he's rude, he tells untruth. I know all that. But to me, on the other hand, he's done a good job in foreign policy. He was doing very good work with the economy before the coronavirus, record job figures, job growth the other day, though. He recognised the threat from China, which I think is a big concern. And to me, what's the alternative? I mean, Joe Biden is nearly senile, and the identity politics he represents, to me, is one of the great challenges of our time. So tell me why I should get off the Trump bandwagon.
All right. Well, let's start with the threat from China, because this is such a shared concern for Australia, for North America, for all the peoples of the democratic world. I worked in the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, almost 20 years ago. At that time, the economy of the United States was approximately 3 times larger than the economy of China. Today, the economy of China is nearly the same size as that of the United States. If the United States and its friends are to balance China and to bring it into better environmental behavior, better human rights behavior, maybe that last is impossible, to enforce policing of a pandemic disease that we're all suffering from, we're going to need to work together. We're going to need to build a coalition. The United States cannot do this alone. President Trump's whole approach to foreign policy has been to fire the allies. He despises American allies. He betrays them. He insults them. He demeans them. He refuses to work together. He blew up the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which he inherited from his predecessors as a structure to contain China. He's left the United States alone in the room with China because he does not understand how big and powerful China has become. And as a result, he's left us all defenseless, as we're seeing during this pandemic. So that's
David,
maybe his most important failure.
Because doesn't that take away the agency of every other country to recognise in their true interests? I mean, Australia knows the China threat, and we're reaching out. We're reaching out to America. I don't see any damage to our relationship there. And his problem with Europe was that those guys were using America as their hired mercenaries. They were not picking up the slack themselves. It's up to Europe to also see the threat and to man up, which I think we're seeing some increase in their military budget since.
President Trump began his relationship with Australia by violating a deal he had made with, well, his predecessors had made with the Australian government. The Australian government naturally regarded those agreements as binding upon any future American government. He insults Australia. He imposes tariffs on Australia, on Canada. He started, long before he started trade actions against China, he began his administration by launching completely groundless trade actions against all of America's friends and partners. He began, and while he would demand more spending by America's European NATO partners, remember, it was Donald Trump who began his administration by questioning NATO, by saying he wouldn't defend NATO partners against Russia. And of course, there's this giant question mark over his obligations to the Russian state and Putin. It is always difficult to manage.
Giant question. We've gone through 3 terrible, grueling years of investigation into this thing, this relationship with Russia. The whole, he colluded with Russia and came up with zip.
No, that's not true. What we came up with was Russia helped him become president. He probably would not be president without the Russian help. 80,000 votes in 3 states. Trump privately and publicly welcomed the help from Russia, and we're left with a giant mystery about why Russia did it. What was their interest? What was their connection with Trump? That was a question that remains unsolved, in part because so many of the people around the Trump campaign successfully lied or forgot. So we can't prove that there was conscious, explicit agreement between Trump and the Russians, and maybe there wasn't. But then a lot of things happen without people consciously and explicitly agreeing. A wink is as good as a nod, as the saying goes. And that left, but what we do know is that Donald Trump came into the presidency saying, I will not defend Estonia if they are attacked. I will not defend other NATO partners if they're attacked, and then launching trade wars against the European Union, against Canada, against Australia too. And our alliance structure is now in a shambles against a China that is nearly as powerful as the United States. So
shambles is a hard word.
When you list Trump,
you say shambles, but really, for instance, America was very forthright about banning Huawei, the Chinese telecommunications giant, from getting into 5G networks. Britain was going all for this Huawei involvement. Britain has now gone America's way on this one. And Australia, of course, has been leading it too. I'm not seeing this shambles. Can you tell me, you wrote that America was on the slide to autocracy. That was your previous Trump book, and this one seems to be continuing that theme. Where's the evidence that America's becoming autocratic?
I've always tried to be very careful in my books about exactly what the problem is. And in Trumpocracy, my first book, I talked about the structure or the way Trump built his power. In this new book, Trumpocalypse, I talk about looking backward, how Trump has used his power. The United States, like any modern democracy, starts with a giant bank balance of institutions, of norms. It's a slow process to corrupt them, but those have been corrupted. Let me just give you one concrete example of how Donald Trump has changed the way America governs itself. Congress historically has the right to subpoena information from the executive. That's how Congress oversees the executive, make sure that things are being done the way they should be. The Trump administration over the past years has simply refused to accept subpoenas from the Democratic House of Representatives. It has taken a position: we will answer questions from our political allies, but if either House of Congress is controlled by our political opponents, we will stiff their subpoenas and we will fight it all the way to the Supreme Court. They've lost every round of that fight, but they've used up the time, and there probably isn't enough time left. If Trump goes out of office in January 2021, he will go out of office not having answered any subpoenas from the House of Representatives for a year. There used to be a rule, an understanding, that the president couldn't operate a private business while he was president. He couldn't direct taxpayer money to himself. He couldn't direct money from his inauguration committee to himself. And Donald Trump has successfully changed all of those rules.
I'm not sure that amounts to a charge of autocracy. I mean, still making himself subject to the rules of various courts, is still observing the rule of law, which I think is important. I mean, you predicted that the media would grow noticeably more friendly to Trump. It hasn't. The CNN would work hard to meet Trump's definition of fairness. It hasn't done that by any means. And that anyone tweeting criticism would be smashed by obscene abuse and angry threats from the pro-Trump troll army. The result is exactly the opposite. And that Twitter is, in fact, now at war with Donald Trump, censoring posts, etc., etc. I'm not sure that I'm seeing the slide to autocracy. What I'm seeing is an amazing full-court press against Donald Trump.
When you talk about the media, it's very important to remember that by far the most important media company in the United States is Facebook. Those of us of a certain age, when we think of the media, we think of CNN, we think of newspapers, but that's in the 21st century, that's not the media. The most important media company is Facebook, followed by YouTube. And Facebook's debt to Trump is amazing. I mean, they publish QAnon stories. Just yesterday, the New York Times reported that of the top 4 stories, most shared stories on U.S. Facebook, 3 were from the Trump campaign, and the 4th was from a QAnon account. Facebook has made clear that they will not in any way check official untruths from the Trump administration. So he's had a lot of impact on the media that Americans consume. And indeed, CNN did put Corey Lewandowski and other Trump people on their payroll. It remains true that the easiest way to get on TV in the United States is to be a pro-Trump talker, because the networks are so desperate to have them. Not just Fox, his pet network, but CNN too. I didn't say that Trump had.
How is free speech? How is Facebook, Zuckerberg, saying free speech? We're not going to do what Twitter is doing. Free speech is, it's like the Post. We don't do anything to censor or double-check one particular person. How's free speech a sign of sliding to an autocracy? And how is the fact that people want to look up a particular Trump article? How is letting them do that a sign of an autocracy?
The key sentence, and by the way, I never said that Trump had accomplished this. I said this is where the trend of the time. The most important sentence in the article you're quoting and in the subsequent book, and I repeat it in the new book, Trumpocalypse, is that in a modern bureaucratic state, the most important power of authority, the most important corrupt power is not the power to persecute the innocent. That's impossible, but the power to protect the guilty. And that is what Donald Trump has done. If you're a friend of his and you commit crimes, if you are a Paul Manafort, if you are a Roger Stone, if you're a General Flynn, you get a whole apparatus of presidential protection. That's why one of the reasons we don't know about Trump's Russia connections is the people who know the most understand that presidential pardons are waiting for them, and they don't flip on him in a way that they would, in a way that other witnesses in other criminal cases would talk.
David,
Donald Trump's
you're presuming guilt. There was a 3-year or 2-year investigation, 3 or 4 years of media hype. And the fact that it's come up with no evidence doesn't entitle you to say that there is evidence, we just need to find it. You mentioned presidential pardons. It hasn't saved Roger Stone, and it didn't save General Flynn. If General Flynn's got a beef, it's the fact that the FBI lied in order to gain a conviction against him. That's the real issue here. If he's trying to defend Flynn, it hasn't worked too well, and he should defend Flynn, because the problem is the FBI has lied about him, and they lied to get the warrants to spy on his campaign. Doesn't any of that concern you?
We have a long continuing pattern. What happened with General Flynn is the same thing that happened in the Ukraine case, where Donald Trump attempted to blackmail a friendly power, Ukraine, to get dirt or to fabricate dirt on his political opponents. That's the offense for which he was impeached. And it's the same technique that he's used against Democratic governors during the pandemic, which is if they politically oppose him, he withholds aid from them. And he threatened to do that to the state of Michigan and other states. But the main story of the Trump years has been, and this is, I think, one of the things I talk about in Trumpocalypse as opposed to Trumpocracy. It has been corruption. That Donald Trump has used his abuses of power, above all, to protect himself as he runs a state of corruption that is unprecedented in American history. We've never had a president direct public money to himself. We've never had a president run a business before. It's never, and it turns out a lot of this is legal because no one ever thought to ban it, because it never occurred to anybody that a president would do it.
In that case, it can't be. If he's running a business, it can hardly be, and legally, it can hardly be seen as a sign of corruption. I mean, who doesn't profit? I mean, Barack Obama just signed a book deal that's going to earn him, what is it, $11
out of office
million or something?
Out of office,
you know,
after office.
Out of office, maybe, but the people have got an eye for out of office later, and they make the deals, they make the connections. I'm not. Look, you've made your case. Yeah, sorry.
Barack Obama can't punish anybody who, if the publisher won't sign a book deal, Barack Obama can't punish them. If, however, a defense corporation does not sign a deal with Donald Trump, he can punish them. So when that company or when a foreign government directs money to him, and we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, he actually has the power to retaliate. It's not because the Trump Hotel is the nicest hotel in Washington. Right. It really isn't. That's not why it's the most successful.
I'll give you a counterexample, and that is the Clinton Foundation, how that operated when Hillary Clinton was your Secretary of State and also an upcoming, clearly a presidential candidate, was a disgrace. And that is millions, billions probably of dollars, including Australian money. I would think that, listen,
that was very improper too.
I got problems with Trump. Well, exactly. But the point is, if you only look at Trump, and you don't see the other side is not much better. Look at Joe Biden with the Ukraine deals, et cetera, and his son.
That is untrue. One is true.
Well, it's not.
The question mark. Wait. But you can't just throw up this giant cloud of words and say we're going to choose random. No, I'm everything I say.
Hunter Biden had a job with an Ukrainian company despite having absolutely no qualifications to fill it. And that was while his father was in charge of Ukraine policy in the administration. At the very least, there's a conflict of interest there that should have disqualified him from that role if things had been done properly.
There's a difference between traffic tickets and murder prosecutions. What Donald Trump has been doing, and not just has been running the largest and most corrupt presidency in the modern history of the United States. And so it is true that what Hillary Clinton did when Bill Clinton was raising money while Hillary Clinton was a likely candidate for president. That was improper. But what Donald Trump has been doing as president, not as a candidate for president, but as president, is the fact that it has lost its power to shock you is itself, that's the sign of the problem. Because I promise you, if we were having this conversation 10 years ago and I described the situation, you would say that is appalling. That could never happen in a democratic country. But it has. And each time it happens, we become used to it and say, well, that's old news now. But once upon a time, old news was new news, and it was shocking.
Well, if I do get an example of Donald Trump pocketing money that shouldn't be his, then I will be shocked. But until then, I'll think, well, he's a bad apple, but in a rotten barrel, let me tell you. And I don't see a better alternative. But listen, thank you very much indeed for taking so much of your time to have an argument all across the oceans with Australia. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.